So now in Matthew 2, we come to the fourth response to Jesus. If you want to remember, the first response that we talked about was just the city of Jerusalem, how they reacted to Jesus out of fear of what Herod would do, and how many people today react that same way about Jesus. What will someone else think of me, regardless of my response to Jesus? And so they really don't respond to Jesus as much as they respond to the responses of other people. Then we looked at the chief priests and scribes who gave what I called a tepid acknowledgement of Jesus. We can't pretend you don't exist, but I'm going to be at best lukewarm, and if conditions are right, I may move to oppose you. I may notice that you're doing things of God, but it's not going to be enough for me to really pay that much attention or to change my life. And certainly we have scores of people that way today. Last time we looked at the wise men and how they're the role models of the real seekers of Jesus, who will seek, ask, and knock at the door. And today we want to look at Herod. Herod being the very strong opponent, a representative of the powerful, the strong, the people who are in control of general society, and who see Jesus as a threat to their power and to their influence. Take a look at these texts in Matthew chapter 2. So here we have King Herod. Now, as you go through the New Testament, through the Gospels and then through the book of Acts, we're going to see several Herods. These are descendants of this particular Herod. We refer to this Herod as Herod the Great. He's the first Herod, and then everybody kind of uses his name as a title of the position of leadership. But this particular King Herod, Herod the Great, he started ruling in Judea and all of Israel as we know it from about 37 BC, and he reigns until about 4 BC. He dies shortly after Jesus is born and moves into Egypt, as we'll see, which again tells us that our calendars aren't quite exactly synced up to history. Of course, it's hard to get those calendars synced up, but nevertheless, this is a Herod. He ruled. He was part Jewish, but not fully Jewish. He was always a bit paranoid over his power, and so he was very ruthless in his ability and his means by which he would defend his position. He actually went to Rome and he purchased the right to wear the name King of the Jews. Most folks in Judea would scoff at that because they knew where he had come from. He was somebody who wanted to kind of get Israel and Judah, that whole area, kind of up to speed with the Roman Empire, and so during his reign, he does all kinds of extensive building projects in Jerusalem and Caesarea by the sea and Caesarea Philippi. and in many other places. I mean, you can go to Israel and still see some of the remains of these buildings that he had built. It's during Herod's reign that the reconstruction of the temple takes place. In fact, it goes on all through the life of Jesus and even through a lot of the life of the apostles. In fact, this temple that Herod started refurbishing and expanding, the temple courts, it does not get completed until about 7 years before it actually gets destroyed by the Romans because of the Jewish rebellion of around 66 AD. But we note that when the wise men come and they just kind of come out of nowhere, ask, where is this child born of the King of the Jews, that he's alarmed. He's alarmed because he knows that he is ruling over a people that's kind of a powdered keg. Doesn't take much for these folks to get agitated. And so he's alarmed by this because he knows any opponents he has, and some of these folks that are so in tune to worshiping God and don't understand the political realities of Roman rule in the Mediterranean, that they'll seize on this and cause all kinds of commotion, that Herod, being who he is, determines that he needs to find out where this child is and let's get rid of him. Of course, the first thing he does is assemble the experts so that he knows and he can inform the wise men where they need to look for this new child. It's in Bethlehem, and so he has a meeting with the wise men where he tries to ascertain when they saw this star rising. And he is pretty good at hiding his motives, certainly from the wise men. And we note later in the story that he used the wise men for his own means, used people for his own advantage, because he says, I want to go worship him as well. I'm just busy right now. You find him, you do all that search, let me know, and then I'll bring all kinds of gifts and etc. to him. Thank you very much. He sends the wise men on their way. It might be a question that you have. Why would a powerful guy like Herod with connections with Rome, why would he be threatened by Jesus? And we had mentioned some of them. But again, we're going to see this over and over again through the Gospels and later in the book of Acts, and hinted at with the letters of Paul and the other general epistles, is that Jesus' kingdom, as he will tell Pilate, who's the Roman governor at the time when Jesus is being tried and crucified, when in that discussion, according to the Gospel of John, Jesus informs Pilate that his kingdom is not of this world. Well, people who are very worldly and who look at things through power and might and earthly status and influence are going to be and still are threatened by Jesus' approach and by the approach of his true followers, because it's not of this world. As we will see in later lessons as we go through the Sermon on the Mount and what this kingdom is all about, it operates on a whole different wavelength than the world. And this becomes a tension point even for those who want to call themselves followers of Jesus. What are you going to rely on? Wealth? Violence? Counting numbers of followers? Or are you going to follow in the character, the type of character that God is looking for, waiting for God to bring about his kingdom on his terms and on his time? And so this is really threatening to people, because real followers of Jesus and Jesus himself are not overly impressed with people who have money, who are not overly impressed with people who have great positions, who aren't really impressed by people who have huge number of followings, Because for Jesus and his followers, you are answerable to God alone. And according to the scriptures, what God has outlined is important to God. In fact, you may pay more attention to the poor and to the weak and to the overlooked, because you realize these are the people that God cares about, and it is often through these types of people that God gets his work done. We note in verse 16 that when Herod realizes that the wise men are not going to return to Jerusalem and give him a report, he's furious, and then he sends some soldiers into the Bethlehem area to kill all the sons, all the boys who are 2 years of age and under, just to try to get rid of this new child born king of the Jews. This again gives us a difference between how the world without God thinks and people who follow Jesus. People who follow Jesus, they're following his example. You're willing to suffer so that other people might live. And that's completely different than how the powerful and the very wealthy without God look at life. The folks who are very powerful and influential according to the world, they see that sometimes people have to suffer so that I, the big shot, can live. And that's different than how Jesus works. That's different than how his followers work. And that's why even today the followers of Jesus are a threat to people of the world. Be strong.